We're not crazy, the system is. Tune in to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Wednesdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Pacifica affiliate WXOJLP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio. Produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project, streaming live, podcasting, and archived at madnessradio.net. Thanks for tuning in to Madness Radio. This is your host, Will Hall. And today we're actually going to be speaking with 5 folks who are involved with the Icarus Project about the Icarus Project's a recent event that happened at Virginia Tech. And maybe I'll just start out by going around and saying who we have here and what your involvement is.
I'm Thomas Burke, and I'm a student at Virginia Tech, a senior.
I'm Madigan, Bonfire Madigan Shive, one of the founding collective members of the Icarus Project.
Hi, I'm Molly Sprengelmeyer, and I am from Asheville, North Carolina, and the Radical Mental Health Collective there.
I'm Maggie Clifford. I'm a senior at Virginia Tech, and I'm from Rochester, New York.
Hey, I'm Sascha DuBrul, and I'm a co-founder of the Icarus Project.
Great. It's really great to have everybody here, and we're actually doing this interview right outside the campus of Virginia Tech. And maybe somebody can just kick us off by talking about what it was that happened yesterday, the discussion and how it came to be and everything.
Okay, so this is Sascha speaking. So we did an event last night on the Virginia Tech campus, which was organized through a professor at the English department, and there's a group of us that's on tour right now, traveling around to college campuses and community centers and doing events. And really, since the events of April 16th on the Virginia Tech campus, we've been in communication with folks here and very excited about dialoguing about alternative visions of mental health support and trying to create more space for dialogue. Last night we had an event with about 25 people, and it was pretty amazing. I don't know.
So what was amazing about it?
What was amazing was just I feel like, at any Icarus Project gathering, it's all about the stories, and it's all about creating space for people to tell their stories. And I think just the energy in the room was so charged with, I think there's a lot. I mean, the students here, I'm sure they'll talk plenty themselves because we're just the ones passing through town, but I think there's a lot of folks who have a lot they want to talk about around here, and creating some space for it felt really good. It just feels like what we should be doing.
I thought it was really interesting that to me, seemed like a very diverse room. Like, coming into it, I thought it may be mostly students and faculty, but in fact, Neil, who had to leave, who was there with us, an NYU organizer, we talked about how it seemed to be about a third students and faculty, about a third kind of counseling, mental health professionals, and about a third sort of mental health religious community members or something. And that was really interesting, to be in a space where all those different voices and perspectives were listening and talking to each other.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that it wasn't just one or two groups, and it couldn't really run away this way. And there were a lot of checks for each group, so to speak. So it ended up being a much more, like you said, diverse conversation. We feel like we went places where we wouldn't have been able to go otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was very powerful. A lot of the issues of suicide came up, and just violence and the pain that goes along with when we talk about mental health, it sounds really abstract, but it was really present in the room, the kind of suffering. And just, I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening knows, but there was a mass murder that happened on Virginia Tech, and 33 people died, and it became a huge nationwide focus, and the media kind of descended on the town, and there was a lot of concern about, okay, we need to put more policies in place to lock more people up or force them on drugs, and then how do we counsel people and how do we respond? And so it was just really interesting to be invited here and to be presenting some kind of alternative view and sort of see what kind of response there would be.
I felt like I had an opportunity to talk about some of the ways that we've decided to deal with this tragedy, which has all been reactionary in terms of like we didn't actually talk about this there, but like putting locks on doors or putting signs around the Black Spirit community, like we're Virginia Tech, we will prevail, or we're Virginia Tech, we're good, we're gonna be all right. But the things that we're doing now are reactionary to the tragedy. Like people are fighting for stricter gun control and like having more security on campus and being more rigid in our standards, and instead of really focusing on the causes of something like this, or how somebody can feel so alienated in a community that they would commit something like this.
Yeah, I mean, something that was really clear last night was the way in which the way that the town here has responded to the tragedy has been to really there are these signs all over the place. It's really interesting to see driving around these Virginia Tech "We Will Prevail" signs everywhere we go. It feels like almost like war. Like, I mean, it has this like quality of we're in a war here, fighting against ourselves or something. And for me, as an outsider coming in and just seeing the military, the cadet folks running around, and I don't come from a place like this, and it's really interesting that the military environment and the conformist nature of that environment feels really alienating to me. And something that I talked about last night was just my understanding as someone who's spent a lot of time in my life feeling alienated in environments I've been in, just knowing that there's always people who feel alienated in environments, and that the ways that people are being that the outreach is being done is going to affect some people well, and then there's all these people who it's never actually going to end up reaching. And so what's so powerful about being able to come to a campus and create some space for alternative dialogue is just knowing that I just want to see it happen more. I just want to figure out how we can have it happen more. Honestly, I woke up at 5:30 this morning with a start, just like having this like vision in my head of when we were walking through the English department yesterday on our way to the office of the woman who put on the event, Bernice. There were these stickers on most of the doors that said "Safe Zone," Virginia Tech Safe Zone, because there's this LGBT Safe Zone training that goes on here. And something we've been talking about with the Icarus Project for a number of years is the idea of creating safe zones and doing trainings in residence halls and in campuses, like in classrooms, to teach to just raise awareness about mental health issues and about how people might communicate with each other better. So it's just, this last night was somewhat of a tease, and that I think there just needs to be so much more.
I'm glad you brought up the safe zone thing, Sascha, because before the shootings, I was in one of my classes. It's called Community Involvement, and a woman came in to talk about diversity issues at Virginia Tech and what she had done, how she'd carved herself a niche to. Not really sure exactly what she did, but she went to a forum on diversity issues at Virginia Tech, and she told a story about, it was either her who stood up and said this or somebody else who stood up and said, does somebody have to die before we actually do something about the diversity issues we have at Virginia Tech? Because we've had various instances where, like at Squire Student Center, I remember the door to the Black Student Alliance was vandalized. There have been, I've been called a fag from a passing pickup truck probably 3 times now, just walking down the street, minding my own business. I'm pretty sure Maggie has also. It can be a hostile environment. I still really love this community, but after the shootings, one of the first things that came to mind was her story of somebody saying, does somebody have to die before we do something about this? And while it was somebody, this was certainly, probably wasn't what that woman was thinking about when she got up and said that, but we're talking about alienation when we are discussing any sort of diversity, aggression due to diversity, and Cho definitely was alienated. I mean, just by listening to some of the interviews that his roommates gave, they weren't very inclusive of him. So
I mean, I feel like it's no secret that a lot of people feel like we're creating an alienated culture. We're creating this place where you communicate online, you communicate like through all these different mediums that are rarely person to person, and it's becoming more easy to do that. You can live your whole life online, and it's like in the face of that, it becomes maybe not more important, but just as important to have these interactions with humans and creating this loving environment and creating safe places everywhere you go, just like having this like safe sphere around you, like you are perfect the way you are, or you're safe here with me. And I don't feel like that's created here, and for some reason people aren't learning how to act that way in a community, and I'm not sure why.
Something that we found with doing our organizing at New York University is that when we tried to have mental health support groups on campus for students either didn't come, or when they did come, they felt really uncomfortable, and it didn't really work. And so what ended up happening was we shifted our focus from having mental health support groups to having discussions about mental health issues and showing videos and like having materials that people could focus on, so that it wasn't like, because it's really important that people talk about themselves, but it's also terrifying to so many people to tell their personal stories. So having, I think something that would be wonderful that could happen on this campus would be to have like a series of discussions, maybe showing some films or showing, and then like having questions after that. And I don't know, just like, yeah,
what was really great is we talked afterwards after the event, and apparently some of the counselors that came were really skeptical, and they were ready to kind of defend and just sort of criticize what we were doing and come out against it. But I think we really didn't meet those expectations. We were coming with a really different spirit and a much more of a listening, collaborative kind of spirit. And at the end, I think there was just such a really strong togetherness that happened. People really felt very positive about it, and it seems like there would be an opening for something like that, because I think that was something that people said, that there was a lot of like, okay, call this toll-free number for a counselor, or get help if you see someone who needs help, please approach them. But is it true that there weren't really like group community kinds of responses to the tragedy?
For me, I wasn't actually in town right when it happened, so Thomas would be a better person to ask about.
Well, I mean, when I brought up the absence of these group sessions, I mean, that's just my experience. And one of the counselors said that she experienced numerous group sessions. But what I was trying to get at when I brought up that point was that the emphasis was placed on, these 1-800, call this number kind of counseling sessions with somebody that you don't know, that you've never met. And while there was, like these recommendations of, just talk with your friends, I feel like that wasn't the primary, the emphasis wasn't placed upon that. The emphasis was placed upon there are professionals available. And who are these professionals? I don't know them.
And to me, that's like that. Okay, even if people are talking to their friends, that still doesn't convince me. I mean, maybe this is too skeptical of other human beings that I'm sharing space with, but I'm not convinced that a lot of the relationships that people have created are like have this structure in place of where they can depend on people, and where they can where they feel like they have real friends, and they have the support system that I think you guys at the Icarus Project are trying to create. I'm not convinced that saying, talk to your friends, talk to people around you is really enough for some people, because I'm not sure that they feel like this deep loving bond with people.
Yeah. from my experience organizing and just being a part of a community where there is a real active mutual aid society, it's definitely taken practice of, really being able to ask, being able to, I think when people are able to be vulnerable and show their weakness or speak their truths, it really, it creates a space, an opening for other people to also speak their truths. And that is powerful in ways, I mean, you don't see it overnight, you can't measure it, but it really does ripple. And so I think when people are able to really step up and have honest conversations, whether that's, with a chosen ally or somebody who seems safe, or with a stranger, because sometimes that's easier for some of us to speak with people who aren't personally invested in our lives. I do think that creates an opening for more of that.
Yeah, I think it was also really important that we presented kind of some of the basic Icarus Project principles in the beginning, just noting that people who take psychiatric medications are welcome. People who don't take psychiatric medication, if you want to define yourself as a psychiatric label, that's totally accepted. If you take a different perspective, that's totally accepted. And I've found in a lot of groups that really helps to just change the atmosphere, that people really realize that you're focusing right on what is a hot button issue around diversity and just trying to deal with it right away and just making sure that it is a safe space, because there was a lot of different perspectives in the room, people who feel really helped by the system and then people who just feel totally abused by the system, because both of those experiences are real and present.
I think that the issue of whether, like, being able to talk to your friends and then your friends not being able to help you, I mean, that's a huge issue, and I think that that's something that a lot of college students can relate to. I think a lot of people in the world can relate to, and just not feeling safe talking about the personal issues that they're going through. And one of my hopes with the work we're doing with the Icarus Project is that we're going to play a part in helping to bring some really concrete tools to people that they can use to be able to create spaces where they live that are more inclusive of being able to talk about their feelings. We've been working on this whole idea of creating these MAD maps or wellness maps, where really trying to have people describe what their warning signs are if they're having issues, and being able to describe themselves when they're in a good space so that they can know if they're in a bad space, how to get back to being in a good space, and then being able to share with the people in their lives how to get back to how to be able to help them, how to be able to be there for them. I don't know, there's I just see a lot happening. I just see a lot of use for it around here. And
Yeah.
One of the most powerful moments for me was when a woman there was just really skeptical about the idea of dangerous gifts and kind of the message, and are we romanticizing this suffering that people go through. And she had just lost a relative to suicide like 8 weeks earlier, and that was a really, really tense moment. And it was like she said she was ready to leave and she wasn't sure she could really trust everyone there. And I think that the key thing is that those kinds of feelings don't ever get talked about. People just have that perspective, and this kind of thinking is just romanticism, and they don't actually get a chance to dialogue with people who maybe have a broader view, and then realize that actually no, it's not quite so simple, that we do actually recognize that there's complexity here.
Yeah, that was really powerful for me as well. And meeting that woman and hearing her story, but also, speaking with her personally afterwards, and also watching her speak with her friends too, and just kind of seeing something in her shifting, like seeing some, I don't know, understanding, opening, expanding, or something that she came with a lot of fear and pain, and I think she left with some sense of comfort, or some sense of at least something some other movement to think, something else to think about, other perspective.
I thought it was interesting when I guess one woman who was her friend, who was one of the local counselors, actually got up and started defending the Icarus Project after I mean, I'm not sure how she felt about it when she showed up, but it seemed like, at least at that point, she was pretty gung-ho about the idea and about its place.
I mean, there's just something so powerful about four people sitting up there and being like, well, this is my life story. This is how I got here. These are some really serious, heavy things that happened to me in my life, and I'm sure they've happened to you too. Like, why wouldn't we talk about that? Why would we keep that inside of us and allow it to brew? And I think something about that, it touched the woman whose sister killed herself, and it touched the other counselors there. And I mean, it certainly touched me too.
When the folks from the Icarus Project were responding directly to the woman the woman whose sister had killed herself 8 weeks before, I wasn't sure if that was really resonating with that woman, and that was that was the great thing about the dynamic and the diversity of the folks who showed up, and how that counselor, that professional counselor, so to speak, was able to kind of sort of translate, it seemed like. But I don't know, that's just kind of what hit me at the moment.
Yeah, I think for me it really touched me when the woman who was the professional counselor said that I think what these folks are really talking about is human difference, and celebrating that. Yeah, and that was, really resonated with me. And, here we are too. Part of this tour is about in solidarity with sort of the equivalent of a National Coming Out Week, because it wasn't that long ago, that being queer or homosexuality was a mental illness, right? And there's been a whole generation of activism around, our difference and coming out with our pride, our queer pride. And actually the words mad pride even come out of that, of the GLBT liberation movement. And it was folks who had been in the system and given these labels, or who related with those labels, or who said, wow, no, we have pride too, and what we've experienced, there's actually power in it. We've learned, we have things to share, we have gifts to exchange. So the Icarus Project, after we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary here of when the project was launched, together with the community this last month of October that we're in, is drawing on our mad gifts, celebrating diverse ability and cultural evolution and mad pride, and just to even inject that into a room of so many people who would maybe not get the opportunity to make those connections, and then see someone like this counselor basically, really realizing human difference and saying that, that was really powerful for me. And what Bernice said, the professor who brought us, she tied a lot of it together for me too, and how we're able to express that suffering and that sorrow. And it was very powerful for me when she talked about how just cleared away all the memorial sites were, and how stark, and nobody was you had to go through some corporate something office to see about putting something on. To me it was like, wow, it has to be approved of how you grieve or what you bring to your experience of that. And I was really moved by that, and I told my little story about when we visited the memorial for the first time. I was struck by how stark it was, and then you hear the military music of the marching bands and the cadets, because this school was originally a military school, right? And there's all these differences happening in the air, and I was feeling just so emotional about what had happened, and the loss of life, and the confusion, and the sorrow. And there's all this gravel, around that "We Will Prevail" emblem thing that looks right up at these huge foreboding administrative offices. And everything in me, impulse control we talk about with those of us who have these sensitivities. And I so wanted to lay down in that gravel and make like a gravel angel, like a snow angel in the gravel. But I felt the authoritative power of the silencing of that opportunity, and the possible punishment of following through with it. And that made me very empathetic and sensitive to what it might feel like to be in this community, right? That I couldn't even express that one that does no harm gesture of healing, just even in my own moment. And I have to say, after that gathering, I felt empowered by all of you and felt listened to in a safe space as well, because we created that together, really. And I went after that, and I made my gravel angel.
Yeah, I drove the getaway car.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, you brought up a lot about the atmosphere. It's a really, I mean, all the buildings are this really heavy, intense stone, and hokey stone, yeah, and the it's like a suburban landscape here, and there are all these military ROTC and cadets going around, and you just got this really intense kind of feeling of just being kind of at the heart of the whole U.S. military machinery around here. And then when the shooting happened, there was all this very creepy kind of, there was information that wasn't coming out, and there was kind of like gaps in the story, and some people were saying that there's cover up, or why aren't they answering these questions, and it's just very, very spooky kind of atmosphere here. And I can see that this would not, I mean, I'm completely not from this community, but just visiting, it's like I could see how it would be really, really hard to be an outsider in this community. It felt very conformist, and very much like you're on your rigid track and that's it, and there's nowhere else for you. So
it's interesting to think the Radford Army Ammunition Plant is like 5 miles away, maybe. And I mean, if you want to talk about a place kind of representing the military-industrial complex, we've got the institution and the manufacturing facility and somewhat of a mentality, but definitely we don't want to cast too much of a shadow upon the Blacksburg community, because it can be a really beautiful thing a lot of times. I'm attracted to it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say it's also autumn here, and it's just gloriously beautiful. I mean, it is strikingly beautiful here, along with, those other feelings and kind of that grid, box, line reality. There's still beauty.
Like, there is this conflict here, because we have this Blacksburg community here. We have like farmers market. We have really neat coffee shop and vegetarian restaurant, like this little corner. Actually, the farmers market is right there on the same corner. But then we also have this like really intense hokey culture, which is like, in my last class today, they were all asking my professor to cancel class because there's a football game on Thursday. So like all the other professors cancel class because they just assume students aren't going to come. There's just like this really strong, we talked about it a little bit last night, this uniformity culture here, like the orange and the maroon. I'm sure this is true at any school that has a really big football or sports team at all. But anyways, yeah.
The hokey is the mascot, right?
The hokey is the mascot, and at orientation.
Hey, what's a hokey?
I am! That's what we learn at orientation freshman year. They're like...
You gotta get oriented.
Yeah, you've got to get oriented to the hokey lifestyle, which, I mean, it's cool. People, it seems like a lot of fun if you're in it. If you're in there and it's like, it looks like fun from the outside. Like, oh, they're really doing.
But doesn't the word hokey mean phony?
That's an interesting point, Will. Because we've all thought it, and I mean, especially those of us who are there on the periphery, kind of, that we watch it, we walk through it, we weave in and out of it, but we kind of like still stay out of our
Because you guys are kind of part of the anarchist info shop scene somewhat.
Yes, that dirty little word. Yeah.
Info shop?
Info shop, anarchy, all of it.
I just want to say to you that you will prevail.
I'm sure, I can tell.
Those are the that's kind of like the equivalent of the yellow ribbon. Is there are these signs everywhere, "We will prevail," and it was interesting. That was one of the first things that people said, that you said last night. Actually, was like, "Oh, brother, we will prevail." It's like it just doesn't really do it. It's just, and everyone really kind of agreed that it was a really sort of a superficial kind of thing.
I was just I've been working trying to get the info shop going, and we've sat for like 6 meetings trying to figure out the best language considering this culture. And anarchist is definitely a word that we don't use, and info shop's not even a term that we're using. We're the Burning Book Community Resource Center, because community, like I was saying last night, like there's this community movement, and we're definitely going to be inclusive, and it's just unfortunate that in this particular culture, the term anarchist kind of makes people shut down a lot of times. But
What about radical?
radical, same thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're not in denial by any means. We sit there and we're like, yeah, we're anarchists or radicals. We're, trying to do something here. But it's just, you can't put that in the mission statement when you're trying to get the zoning board to rezone some structure for your use. So
if you're just tuning in, this is Madness Radio, and we're talking with a couple of students from Virginia Tech and organizer from Asheville, North Carolina, and folks from the Icarus Project about an event that we did last night, a community dialogue on alternative mental health.
That whole issue of the word community and the word radical, when we were making the flyer to send to you all, we took radical out of it, and it's language, we refer to ourselves as a radical community mental health organization, but I think there's probably a lot of people in this country who, when they hear the word radical, they think Islamic fundamentalists, they think, and I think just for me, I think the reason I'm so excited about being here in Blacksburg is that I see this is the heart of where we need to be doing organizing work, and and this town, for so many people, and this school is such a symbol of what's going wrong, in this country. And I feel like if we put energy into organizing around here, I feel like it'll be it'll come back in a really
Well, I know the word radical means getting to the roots, but what really do we mean when we say radical? That's kind of always a good discussion, because it doesn't mean we're Islamic fundamentalists or Christian fundamentalists for that matter.
Yeah, the term that we like to use is alternative, because that's what a lot of folks tend to be looking for, is some alternative to, as soon as they realize how messed up our social climate is here, then that's your next step. Try to find an alternative.
Yeah. Neil Gong, who just took off to go back to the city, we were having this conversation about the word alternative, and he was saying when he was growing up, he listened to the alternative rock station, and he never knew what it meant, really. Just that was the music that, this alternative rock. I think any word you use has the danger of having the meaning just sucked out of it and spit back at you. So
Yeah, I can take a shot at it. I mean, for me, radical means a couple of pretty basic ideas. One is we don't live in a democracy in this country. This is an oligarchy that's run by corporations and the military. The Democratic-Republican electoral game that's played is really a sham. And if we were actually going to vote on any kind of real change, there would be opposition on a military level. It wouldn't be a democracy. It wouldn't reveal it. I mean, Bush basically stole those elections, and I think our entire culture is dominated by commerce and private property and profit, and you can speak and you can vote, but within a very narrow kind of range of what's possible, and what comes right down to it, like money rules. And pretty much all the liberal democratic politics that are out there don't really get to the heart of that issue of, as long as we don't live in a democracy, as long as people are dominated by privately owned wealth and everybody's working for a living, we're not really going to make any kind of headway for taking care of each other. In fact, we're going headlong into ecological disaster and racism and war and poverty globally. So that's my little speech about what it is to be so read my essay on the website about it. So
I wanted to kind of underscore what you were just giving us an oversight of, something that I wasn't aware of until I came to this community yesterday. And the woman who's so graciously hosting us here actually is a small business owner here, and she does sort of activist, fair trade, very progressive, makes her own clothes stuff. And the backlash that she got from the community for not just diving into the hokey thing, and she actually got some hate kind of banners up on her store because she just didn't get in line with how you were supposed to appropriately respond to the events and the shooting. But what was even more eye-opening for me, and I'd love to hear some of your all thoughts because it went to the heart of this issue for me, is people were asking her if her profits were up because they've been making these memorabilia and selling them, and that's how you're supposed to show it's kind of like the war happened and it was like Shop for America, yeah, like America open for business, and it's like we're profit, you know. And then of course my brain goes to, wow, was this actually a setup? You know, I mean, did they manufacture this to manufacture? I mean, I can't help but go there in the context, and I'm wondering about you who live here, how you might feel about that.
One thing, I walked into the tobacco shop and was talking to the guy who's the cashier there, or was the cashier there, and he was like, oh, it's all conspiracy. It was all set up without a doubt. And I was like, well, it's the first time I've heard somebody say that today. It's pretty solemn, but I'm glad you can come out and say that. And then also, Margaret was saying how that was a reporter from the Roanoke Times who came in and asked about whether her profits were up. And I mean, it was just another like, oh my, the Roanoke Times is the most terrible piece of media I've experienced. One day the cover story was a ferret that got caught in a washing machine and survived. Like, that's not news.
I mean, obviously there was this feeding frenzy here after April 16th with the media, with people coming in. I still get requests. This is 6.5 months later, of people like I'll be walking around our little corner, and like a couple people, it's happened a couple times, they will come up to me and be like, well, where's the memorial site? And which is nice, like, to go there, but it's like I am pretty certain that they want to go there to like take pictures of it and talk about it and be like, yes, I went there, and which is, I mean, there's just something a little sick and twisted about it, just like because it seems like another way to, like, I don't know, artificially deal with the real grief that we're feeling.
I mean, it just strikes me like, you know, it's just another aspect of the culture that we live in, where it's like our society is predicated upon people like that, like hating themselves and you know, and really feeling really empty. And I think that there's such a lack of community. There's so many people walking around feeling so empty and trying to get their psychic sustenance from like the television or from wherever, that, you know, they want to feel like they're part of something real. They want to feel like they're, you know, and that's what a lot of tourism is, and that's you know, and I think that the way to combat that, the way to deal with that, is to create community and to build actual like positive structures that people can get involved in. And so I don't know, I
guess I see now with like, we're all living kind of, well, I mean, a lot of people are now living nomadic lives. Like, we're not staying in one place where we can develop these communities and have these close contact with people all the time. And so, I mean, again, that's one thing that like blows me away about the Icarus Project, is like it's like that conscious effort to be like, okay, no, maybe we weren't born here, maybe we're not going to be here for more than 3 years or more than 3 months, but like, we need to be able to have these safe communities no matter where we go. And it's like, it's not as if our lives happen in a way now that we're staying in one place and that we can know everything about everyone all the time. But it's like, if we make the commitment to being honest with ourselves and with everybody around us, then that's a good start.
I mean, look at what's going on here right now. The people sitting at this table, like, here's Molly. We've never met. We met for the first time yesterday. You know, you know, we met you yesterday. Where there's like the Icarus Project is bringing a lot of people together, and it's really exciting. And it's not in the traditional ways. You know, we're doing this tour around the country, and we're like connecting all these different people who are going to end up, I don't know, who are like that. Like, we can talk about, you know, the alienation that the internet creates by everyone spending so much time in front of the computer, but there are also these ways that, you know, in the same way the oppressive climate here is really stifling, but then, as Molly points out, it's like so beautiful. You know, there's like everything's really complicated, you know, and I think we're figuring out new ways of how to build community, you know, and that's where we're sitting at this table making it happen together. You know?
Interdependence. We're living that interdependence. We're not analyzing it or over-intellectualizing it. We're, you know, we're walking together asking these questions, and we're living them and holding each other accountable to our ethics and our desire and our lived experience. And I think making space for the folks with the lived experiences who have been so ostracized and marginalized because their differences, and there's a great history of that actually in this country as well that we suppress, and it's hard to think about that when, like, we've been talking about this military presence is so big or whatever, but actually we have a very large culture and history of resistance and solidarity, and the folks from indentured servants to runaway slaves to, this kind of tribal, this patois of and I feel like this is actually indicative of a time we're living in and the culmination of that collective experience. And there's a really beautiful quote that's like from the 1880s or something, and it's an anarchist organizer from that time, and they're saying, after so many years of hating ourselves and each other, we're committed, I'm totally paraphrasing this, but we're committed to finally loving each other, and that's why we're against laws, and we're for this interconnected, interdependent solidarity.
So we were talking about just how kind of outsiders come in, and actually I think I even heard that the Scientologists sort of swooped down on Virginia Tech after the event, and I wouldn't have come here without being invited. I think it's very different kind of thing, and I think it's important to really recognize that there's like an outsider media frenzy exploitation that happens, and that's really not where we want to go with any of the kind of support that the rest of the country wants to provide through the Icarus Project to a place like Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you guys are trying, what you're trying to say now is like, the Icarus Project now is on tour, and you guys are going around to communities and hoping to begin to create spaces for people to let go of the boundaries and walls that we've created so that we can survive and like turn ourselves off to whatever is going on around us, because some of it's like too painful or it's too nonsensical. Like even just some of the structures, literally some of the buildings and roads and cars are just like too much. Like it's just, why is this here? Why are we building more parking garages? Why are we building parking lots instead of green space? I mean, there's so many contradictions and confusion going on that it's nice that there are people now who are actually working to create a space where it's safe to talk about anything, the conflicts that you're experiencing inside. And I don't see it as something that is possible to create without that real human contact. Without letting go of the things that maybe we hold on to too tightly, if that makes sense. We used to define ourselves. I don't know.
I guess one of the trickiest parts of trying to be an organizer with the Icarus Project is how, and I think it's this happens with a lot of kinds of organizing, is that we have, we're putting together these tools to give to people, and we're trying to be an inspiring force, but we're also trying to, it's like coming into a community and trying to be inspiring and then leaving and then hoping that pieces of it are going to stick around, and and then also trying to, I mean, I think we did a really good job last night of creating a space that we opened up and to really let people speak their truth and talk about what was going on in their community, and that felt really good, but I just I want to figure out how we can keep working together. And yeah,
I guess I have a question for you guys. And how do you see events like this moving in the future? Is there some sort of protocol? Yes, last night you opened with that awesome video and the cello, which was so incredibly beautiful. I forgot to mention that to you. That was so wonderful. but then creating that circle and physically creating a circle and being like, all right, we're all sitting in this circle, we all like have an open say here. Is this like a natural progression you see these meetings going? Is that like what you're trying to, is that how you foster it?
I think it's really, it's different in different communities, and who I think who comes and what they bring really influences often the direction something will take. I remember before the event last night, the other organizers were really ready to listen. Really ready to just listen to this community. And I think that's what happened, but it was guided largely by who showed up.
Right.
Yeah, I think there was, right at the beginning, there was definitely some skepticism and some guardedness. And I think we came out of it with just a really positive feeling, and just a feeling like there could be future events. And I think we would get the support of people in the faculty and the counselors and also the students to try and create something, whether it's Icarus Project kind of work or Asheville Radical Mental Health Collective, or whether it's just something in the spirit of this idea of creating an open, safe space for people to talk outside of professionals and authorities controlling and setting the agenda.
Yeah, I see that. What I think we're envisioning, what we're hoping for, is that in the coming years there are going to be more and more campuses where events like this are going to be happening on a regular basis. And that part of the answer to your question is that, yeah, we do have somewhat of a formula about how we do our events, and it's always about talking meeting agreements at the beginning and telling some personal stories, and that's always how we do it, in one form or another. But I think the idea, I think our power as a movement is going to grow, like the more campuses are actually doing this work, and I think there's also some of the stuff that we talk about. I mean, it's a very interesting, there's this gaping void right now in college mental health services, and all over the country they're trying to figure out what to do about it, because there's this whole generation of kids that are coming to school that have, and they've been taking drugs since they were they've been diagnosed with all kinds of things, and the mental health services don't have the resources to be able to support those kids, and they're looking for alternatives. And I think Virginia Tech is like the glaring example of how things have gone wrong, and I'm hoping that we can take advantage of the fact that there's this void to really be able to build something amidst it,
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking to me that it seems like the main thing that you can get out of something like this is just be honest. Honesty, be honest with yourself and the people around you. It's just so simple.
Very radical.
I know, very radical, totally. I don't understand how we as a society have missed that simple thing. Honesty, respect. And that's how to be a human 101, but that's totally missing. It's gone.
Here we all are deciding together what it means to be human, and what actual relief I sense we all feel when we check in with each other, that basic humanity. I think it was really interesting that it was humanities departments, like medicine and humanities stuff, that invited us, because I think that that's part of what we're really looking at. What does it mean to be human right now under this blue sky with these clouds, and how I act and how I feel, and who sees what in that, That's very, I think, the heart of what we're saying, this radical honesty.
Which to me brings it back to kind of our preparation for starting the tour a few days ago, which is we went and saw the new director's cut of Blade Runner, several of us from the Icarus Project, and which we just love this film, and it's all about who is really human and who gets to decide who's human and not human, and how do you lose yourself in a technological society, and then how do you gain it, and so yeah, it is about how are we human, and it's a very simple question with a very radical answer, I guess, is that we have to go against the grain of society to be human.
I just, with Madigan talking about what it means to be human, is I'm in the humanities department, I'm in the English department, and one thing that I found is, like, rarely are we ever specifically asked in the humanities to define what it is to be human.
So we are just about out of time. Listen, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you.
Madigan, Bun from Madigan Shive, and Molly Sprengelmeyer.
Maggie Clifford and Thomas Burke, who had to leave early.
Sascha DuBrul.
And you've been listening to Madness Radio. Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Madness Radio is broadcast every Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Pacifica affiliate WXOJ-LP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio in Northampton, Massachusetts. For our live internet stream, podcasting, show archives, and more, visit madnessradio.net. Madness Radio is co-produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project. For more information, check out freedom-center.org and theicarusproject.net. For more mental health radio, listen to the News Hour from mindfreedom.org, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have an idea for a story or guest on Madness Radio, or you just want to share what's in your head, contact us at radio@madnessradio.net.
KWMD Kasilov, 90.7, Anchorage 104.5.